Hi there guys, welcome to the Agent Economy, episode 9 with Chris Grimsey, founder of Blackbird, and Stephen.
Hey Chris.
Good to see you in person.
Yeah, first time.
First one. It's we've done this now for a number of weeks, but we thought we'd get together and obviously meet in person and then catch up and discuss all things AI search, agentic commerce, LLM advertising, frontier models, and founder life just in general, how things are going. So yeah, exciting to be here.
For sure, and a ton of stuff has happened since we last spoke.
Yeah, it's been crazy. Yeah, it's me personally, I'm struggling to keep up with all the changes in the market, in the industry, all the things that are going on. It's it's difficult to keep pace with it all.
The only good thing is I never struggle to figure out what to post on LinkedIn.
Very true.
There's always something that's come up or dropped, and I think I can just spin that out into a quick post. So for that reason, it kind of works quite well. But for sure, the volume of changes is just off the charts right now. And I think one of the things that was super interesting in the last couple of weeks was the developments with Claude and the new model with Fable that came out. Mm-hmm. I was super pumped to get that and access it, and immediately went into like overdrive, like getting it to run loads of projects for me, and then was kind of devastated when I saw that it had been turned off. I think maybe like 5 days
That's right.
later. And then super interesting story behind that. I saw someone had posted on X a thread which went into some detail about maybe what was going on behind the scenes, but lots of speculation about like the US government involvement with Claude previously, because I think they'd pulled Claude out because they wouldn't work with them on some of the military engagements. Right. Exactly. Mm-hmm. And I think there may be also something with Donald Trump wanting to use it as leverage for trade negotiations.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's some politics at play, and a potential equity stake in the business from the US government. So we'll see how it plays out, but it's, we did the same. So we were testing Fable. It was incredible and then pulled very quickly. So there's definitely a FOMO type attitude. We want access to it, but it's obviously blocked at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, one of the things I got it to do, I did some like a real deep dive piece of research on loads of sports data that I've got. So I think I mentioned before,
That's
like
right.
Strava data, all the data all pulled into one place. And I got some interesting results from the previous model, and I'd said to the new one, Fable, hey, just like run it again and see what you can find. And it came back with some really interesting results, which I then went to see a cardiologist about on Monday and sent him all of the data in advance. And I was kind of thinking I'd turn up and the guy would be like, just, get out of here, what you doing? But he was like super pumped at all of the information that I'd provided.
Nice.
And I think helped come to a pretty good conclusion about what I need to do, which is basically chill for a little bit.
Take a day off, basically. Yeah. Nice. Yeah, there's so many like applications for it. If you've got data sitting there and you've got access to these frontier models, like it's just unbelievable what you can do now.
It did throw a couple of questions up with clients though, right? Which when they saw that happen, and they were asking, well, what's the right way for us to be going about this? Because if we build a load of let's say infrastructure around one of these models and then it gets pulled for a reason, like what do we do? And of course, like as we know, a lot of the tech that exists already uses multiple different models, and we were talking about Blackbird earlier, and the tech that you've got being able to route things to the different models that are available. But I think it does, like a good way to think about this is you really need to own your own data. You need to have your own data stored somewhere locally, and then you need to probably be model agnostic about how you go about interrogating it, right?
Yeah, super important. Yeah, it's especially on the Anthropic side. And as these models get more and more powerful, they're going to start to get regulated by governments, by central organizations. So we made a conscious decision at Blackbird to be agnostic, to route the task to the relevant model based on whether it's kind of heavy duty or whether it's quite a simplistic task. So we can go to a lesser model. But if you go all in, you're going to have some challenges going forward because, as you've seen, Fable gets pulled after 5 days. If you've built your business around those workflows, then it's going to be high risk.
For sure. And then interestingly, around the same time, there was some news that came out in the UK about having like sovereign capability locally in the UK. And interestingly, there is actually a computer or a big piece of tech stack in Bristol University called Isambard, which is designed exactly for that. And I know there's now quite a lot of effort being put into making sure there is a like locally held model and technology in the UK, so that they're not beholden maybe to using all the US tech.
Yeah, makes sense. And I think we're obviously reliant upon US models at the moment, but who knows what that's going to look like going forward. Open source is another discussion as well, like how are we going to be able to leverage those going forward. the models themselves are probably 6 months behind, you reckon, the frontier models?
Yeah.
But they're still extremely capable.
For
so
sure.
like that opens up opportunities as well. So yeah, it's going to be fascinating, but I just hope they're not too heavily regulated so I can get my hands on Fable.
Exactly. And I think what was interesting about it is it gave you a little snapshot window into like what is going to be possible in maybe 6 weeks time or 2 months time or 6 months time, because every time I get stuck building something at the moment, I have to remind myself that it's not possible today, but actually in 3 or 6 months time, it probably will be.
Yeah, for sure.
So like, don't get rid of the idea, just like hold it, park it, and then come back to it, and hopefully you'll be able to
100%.
solve it.
Yeah, we've seen, and we've spoken about this on the agent economy, that the models themselves, whereas previously the capabilities were improving every 6 months, 4 months, it's now starting, the model releases are so quick that actually the capabilities of the models are just improving like monthly now. So where we're at currently, you fast forward 6 months, like who knows what that world's going to look like.
Who knows?
It's crazy. Which brings in recursive self-improvement. The models then start to improve themselves over and over. I don't know whether you saw the Anthropic article that came out about when AI learns and basically builds itself. We'll put it in the description, but it was fascinating. Basically, recursive self-improvement. These models are just going to get better and better and better. And it's not going to be humans in the loop that are doing it. It's going to be AI building the new model. And that's where you get that hockey stick growth. And then, who knows, Terminator 5 comes out.
Maybe. But staying on Anthropic and Claude, and then maybe let's bring it back a little bit to like consumers interacting with the models. I saw that Claude had started bringing shopping cards or shopping information into Claude, which is really interesting because I've always thought about, from a consumer angle, it's really a Google Gemini thing and a ChatGPT thing.
Sure.
And, Claude, mainly a business tool, right? But seemingly lots of people using Claude also asking it shopping questions. So they're now going to start surfacing product cards so you can go through and shop. And I just wonder, thinking about the new frontier models in Fable and Mythos, like, what's that going to do about finding products for you across the internet, and how good could that be? Building a travel plan, or scheduling everything you're going to buy grocery wise. Yeah,
it's going to be wild. And I saw I think it was from SimilarWeb, the Gen AI traffic split across the different frontier models. It was fascinating to see ChatGPT is just getting eaten away.
It is in share for sure. Yeah. But then I also saw volume of traffic to ChatGPT growing still significantly month by month. And what that tells us is the pie is getting bigger.
Yeah.
So we know that when people do go and interact with these platforms, they search more, they ask more questions because it's higher utility. So yes, ChatGPT's share of that total market is shrinking.
But the actual searches themselves.
But the total market is increasing.
This is what we talked about a lot about Google, right? So everyone thought the kind of search pie was somewhat stagnant, growing slightly, but not really. You throw in Gemini, you throw in AI overviews, AI mode, that pie just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, which then equates to more searches, more ad slots, more auctions, more revenue for Google.
For sure, totally. And then I see it in my own behavior as well now in terms of asking questions. Maybe it's on Google or on ChatGPT, but the follow-on, there's normally a couple of follow-ons where I go a bit deeper to get to, or it makes me think of another question I can ask, or prompts me to do that. Whereas on Google, 5 years ago, I would have searched something and then maybe I found a blue link, I've gone to a page, I've read it, and then that's it. Like I'm done. It's the extent of my research has tapped out at that point.
Yeah, it is amazing how, like, since the introduction of ChatGPT back in 2022, how user behavior has changed pretty quickly. Instead of typing in a search query, navigating the web through the blue links, you can now get that answer directly in the answer engine, and you're engaging with it more frequently, having conversations with it. So the user dynamic has changed pretty dramatically. And for brands, it's been, we work with a lot of clients, right, that it's a headache now for brands. You no longer have search query rank number one, see that traffic, and you have that attribution, which is very clean. Now it's quite messy.
Really messy. And I think that was, in looking back now in hindsight, it was quite a simple model to deal with and to plan for as well. And I think the challenge for brands going into 27 and then thinking ahead of that is how do they plan and how do they budget for this stuff? Because right now I don't think anyone's got it locked and knows exactly what to do. Yeah,
no, definitely not. It's it's super interesting. I think whereas before it was very easy, it was very simplistic model. Now you introduce digital PR, external citations. You've got different ways that the models are extracting data. It's become complex, even more technical. So for brands, it's really looking at search less as a kind of performance channel, but looking more at what does it look like holistically across brand, and start to incorporate some of that brand budget into it.
For sure. And then I guess the challenge in an organization is trying to figure out, like, who does this sit with? Who's responsible for it? Because I'll speak to a lot of e-commerce directors, because that's the role I did previously. Sure. And they'll be looking at it from how they manage their part of the business. But like you said, it also touches the brand teams and the brand budgets and how they're thinking about the organization, and ultimately probably rolls up to like the super senior overview, some person who has the full overview of the sales and marketing function to decide, how and what should be the engagement with AI search and with Agentic, which is 100%. Quite a challenge to solve for. And we did see just in, I think, last couple of weeks, more roles posted around Agentic and Agentic commerce. There was some that went out live on Amazon, I think a couple of months back now. So definitely seeing that, more of that. And I think we probably end up with, like we had e-commerce center of excellences, that started maybe in like 2015, that kind of era. I think we're going to start to see the Agentic, those like Agentic teams get built inside of organizations in 2027.
The way we've been working, it's been working really well with some of our clients, is it's a central function within the organization, kind of laddering up to the CMO or whoever is in that kind of C-level role. But within that, you have the web dev team, you have SEO or search specialists, digital PR, and then the content marketers within it as well, and really a centralized function which everyone feeds into. Because there is a lot of changes required on the site itself with regards to kind of traditional SEO, but then obviously citations coming from third-party sources are extremely important. So you're kind of conversing with PR teams that maybe not have familiarity with SEO
for sure,
or AI search. So it's an education piece across the organization and across a lot of those different functions.
Definitely. And then you layer in, different geographies as well, and think about it from a global point of view, and it gets more complicated again. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that evolves. We talked a lot about the organic side of things just then, but we know the ads are coming in hot on ChatGPT. Obviously, apparently still not going to happen on Claude, right? They made that statement. Definitely not on Claude. They did the advert. They took the piss out of ChatGPT. But they are going to show shopping cards.
Yes.
And it'd be interesting, like, how they're going to are they going to monetize that? How does that monetize? How is it monetized? If it is, and there's some kind of incentive structure, well, that's kind of the same as showing ads, really, because you're influencing the answers. So it'd be really interesting to see how they navigate that. But then in terms of ads and ChatGPT, obviously starting to become more widely available through the self-serve, running some ads for clients now already in the US. I'm waiting for the email notification about when it goes live in the UK. I thought it would have done it already. Because I think a lot of free users of the free platform have been getting told that the policies are changing and adverts are coming in, but I haven't seen it yet. And then I think that brings another layer to figuring out internally in an organization, how do they manage it? Because not only is it the PR teams, the SEO teams, it's now the paid ad teams as well. They're going to be getting involved. And then the big question is, where do you show ads? Like, if you're organically mentioned by a model, do you also show an ad? And if you're not organically mentioned, then in theory, that's where you do want to place an ad, right? So it'd be interesting to see how that optimization and placement is going to work.
And the pricing mechanism right behind it. So if you're strong in that initial response and then you're showing ads, does that impact your cost per click because you're more relevant? Thinking back to the Google model. So there's going to be different pricing mechanisms, I think, in play. And I saw from OpenAI recently, I think it was actually yesterday, some of the product releases that are coming or have been introduced already, things like product feeds, some adjustments to the pricing models. Just knowing, obviously coming from a tech background and building tech now, the speed you can introduce new features and capabilities with AI, I think their product within 6 months is going to be fully baked out and it's going to be incredible.
I hope so, because at the moment it's still a bit clunky and that product feed is whack. So we tried to do it with Brandon. It was really painful to set up. So part of me was like, we should just park this and come back to it in maybe a month's time and it'll probably be a whole lot easier.
You think so?
I hope so. And then, but one really interesting thing that I was reading about, I think it was just last week, was when ads came in on Amazon, Generally, it was the PPC ads, so the lower funnel, sponsored products on the retail site. You were a whiskey brand, and when someone typed in whiskey, you said, we want to appear at top of search, right? And you paid if you got the click. But at the beginning, they didn't include relevance of products, right? Okay. So in theory, you could be Coke and you could bid on whiskey because you wanted Coca-Cola to appear every time someone searched for whiskey, and therefore buy Coke to go with the whiskey. And that still probably works and is true today that you can do that. But if you're in a completely different category, umbrellas, something, and you're just like, we just need to bid on every keyword out there because we want max visibility, then you could do that at the beginning. And the brand Anchor, the power bank brand, that was basically that's how they scaled on Amazon. They just bid everywhere on everything to get visibility. And then obviously that kind of worked for that brand, but it's not a great experience for a consumer if you're seeing ads all over the platform for things that you're not interested in buying in. And Amazon then started layering in a lot more relevance requirements for those ads to get shown.
Nice.
And I wonder what's going to happen with ChatGPT. At the beginning, can you just bid on anything everywhere, or are they going to basically only show you your ads where they think it's relevant? And we know in the targeting you get to put in this context hints, and when you do the bulk uploader, it just says keywords and negative keywords, so they give you a bit of
the entire encyclopedia, please.
Give you an insight as to how that's working, maybe more in the back end. But I think it's going to be super interesting to see if any brands go super hard on it and maybe do an Anchor playbook and just say we just want to be visible everywhere on ChatGPT to try and scale out our brand.
I think in the initial phase, there's going to be a lot of brands doing that, especially in the e-com space. They're just going to basically flood the market, see what's working, because the price of entry is going to be relatively cheap.
It should be supply demand means.
So they're going to your point, add in bulk keywords, run it across everything, see what's working, what's not, and just adapt from there. But it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I think, and I talk about this a lot, but there's going to be a lot of occasions where you can't just crowbar your ad into a space.
Sure.
Especially if you've got within the initial response mentions, citations, recommendations, and then you've just got an ad which isn't in that initial response. So there's going to be a big push, a big play to have that AI visibility first and then supplement that with advertising. So it's the reverse of Google, right? You don't have the ad slot at the top where you can kind of correct. We'll see how that plays out. But you can't just at the moment have that ad slot at the top and pay more to win. You have to be recommended and then obviously supplement with ads. But I think if they do introduce new ad formats at the top, banners in the side, however that looks,
could be.
Does that erode the user experience?
Yeah.
Most people don't like ads, right? So it's going to be a difficult one to navigate. And Perplexity is a great example. They introduced advertising and pulled it pretty quickly because they saw it was detracting from the user experience. So they're going to have to be careful with it because, it's a very different interface to your kind of typical media channels. So we'll see. But I know there's a lot of marketers and agencies that want to turn the taps on.
I think so. And then, in terms of then figuring out who's doing what on these models with advertising, I know that a bunch of the tools now are starting to track when adverts are firing. Yeah. So against queries, obviously, we know we've talked about that in the podcast series about how it works in terms of tracking your visibility against certain queries on an organic basis.
Yeah.
But now you start to get in some of these tools a metric that will tell you, okay, well, against that particular query, 20% of the time an ad's firing, and when it fires, it's for this brand, or this is who's advertising it, which is pretty interesting intelligence to get, right? Obviously, doing all of that through scraping, and you can pay for tools that give you that intelligence on different platforms as well. But I think quite quickly you'll be able to understand, okay, this is where we have organic visibility. Yeah. This is where our competitors are advertising within the broader category and the different queries. And, here's potentially a white space that we can get some visibility. Or, here's a place where we really need to go and defend our brand because, competitor X or competitor Y is really starting to pay to get the visibility there. So
definitely.
It's going to be, I think, a very competitive sport, and almost like more competitive than other ad placements have been, just because from the very beginning you have a load more visibility about what's going on. Yeah,
for sure. A little tip for the audience that we're using at Blackbird is we're scoring different parts of the initial response. So, for example, a mention would be scored as a 1.
Yep.
A citation scored as a 5, and a recommendation, the Holy Grail, recommended as a 10. Then from there you can ascertain, okay, based on that scoring, we're mentioned, but we're not recommended. Let's supplement with ads. There's a citation there, but again, we're not part of that initial recommendation. So maybe we need to invest some money in advertising. And actually, we've been recommended and there's no competitors in this space. Do we need to support that with advertising?
For sure.
You can kind of score the initial response and then make a decision on whether advertising fits into that world.
Yeah, that's a really good way of doing it. And I think it's a more comprehensive way of thinking about it versus the idea of, just do we have organic visibility in general?
Yeah.
And if not, then should we run ads? Because it's really interesting, that citation piece, right? Because it's true that, and I've seen this in a bunch of research I've done for brands, they might be highly cited, but they're not recommended, right? And so, I mean, it's a problem to solve for sure, because you want to be recommended. But in some ways, great that you're the citation, because in theory, you've got the authority. And then if you start to update the content on your site, speak to more of the queries that people are asking about, or certainly the query fan out, the questions that go and get asked by these models, then you should be able to shift yourself into the recommended bucket, right? Whereas if you're, not mentioned, you're not cited, you're not recommended, then it's got it's got a long game to play to get into the space.
Yeah, it's there's different ways to do it, and I think we've started to see, and again with the models adjusting all the time, the mention lists reducing, the amount of citations to brand increasing with ChatGPT. So that initial response is in flux constantly. So you need to be monitoring all the time, and especially the frequency of the model updates. They're changing now more rapidly. So the response is changing, and you need to be on top of what does that look like for us as a brand?
For sure.
Are we part of that response? Are we in the listicles? Are we cited? Yes, no. And then that opens up a question. If we are cited, what does that actually mean? Is that useful to us? Yes, but how does that translate to revenue? So
for sure,
the attribution piece is still a bit of an unknown.
Yeah, and so on the citations bit, I always find the interesting detail in there is what parts of the brand's website are being cited, which blog is it, or which page is it getting information, and why is it getting it from there. So that's a really interesting thing to dig into. And then I was like, this game keeps changing with these model releases. I was thinking we're going to get to a point where everything's going to plateau, it's going to normalize, we can all catch up, everyone will figure it out. Hopefully. But based on what you said at the beginning with the models helping themselves get better, actually probably goes maybe in the other direction. So in that version of events of the future where model releases increase in frequency, everything keeps changing super rapid, how does a brand keep pace with that? How do they say, okay, well, this is going to be our strategy about how to be visible in AI when you don't even know what the models are going to be in 2 months' time?
Yeah, 100%. And if you think business planning, right, your marketing team at the end of the year, they'll be planning for the year ahead. This is where we're investing budget. This is what we want to achieve based on all these channels. I don't know how you do that. I think that's an impossible task, especially in the space like AI search, agentic commerce, advertising in LLMs. The pace of innovation and change is just so fast and fluid. It's difficult to plan 3 months ahead. Looking at between Fable and Opus for Anthropic, it was incredible, the difference.
For sure.
So it's how as a marketer, I don't think it's access to tools, access to data, building has never been easier, but actually planning and budgeting and managing marketing within an organization, I think has never been harder.
I mean, one way to solve it is maybe allocate some budget to work with agile agencies like yours and mine.
Big time, yeah. Preferably $1 million plus for our listeners.
For 27. But actually, coming back to the frontier models and how that's changing quickly, I mean, there's a question about whether that stuff actually gets deployed to the free users and on what kind of, let's say, fallback period or window afterwards, right? Because I can imagine a world where the frontier models, the best versions of the tech that's available is available to people who pay and continue to pay more.
Yeah.
Whereas we know from a consumer brand's point of view, most of what we're talking about here is people using and accessing these tools for free, which is where you want to be organically visible and then pay maybe with ads as well. But that might mean that actually on the planning for the consumer visibility side gets a bit more stable.
Yeah, potentially.
Whereas thinking about what's happening inside of those frontier models and the people who are using them, which is maybe more of a B2B question, right? If you're selling B2B tech, that's really your core audience are paying
for sure
and using Claude versus buying whiskey, toothpaste, whatever it might be. That's generally just free questions going into ChatGPT.
Yeah, B2B tech. I'm from a tech background, so we do a lot with B2B. And yeah, it's where does your ICP live, basically, and typically it's going to be those paid frontier models, Claude being one of them, and we've started to see that percentage share of usage go up in Claude. So for us, it's a no-brainer. We need to be tracking there because the ICP lives there. And then ultimately, what does that optimization playbook look like for each of those brands that we're working with? So it's a lot of brands are like doubling down on Google and ChatGPT, but you need to really look across the board and look at the different models and then interpret the results because they will differ per model.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then, I mean, on that paid version and accessing the frontier models, it was interesting when Fable did go live, it did say this is available to you until the 22nd of July. June. Was it June, July? I can't remember.
It was June,
yeah, so it wasn't long. It was like 2 weeks access. And then, but it didn't say what they were going to do after that.
No.
Like, so presumably there was going to be like, hey, you need to pay a premium or something else. And so I wonder if that just keeps stacking. And so like it gets more and more expensive. There's a couple of founders I know who, they're definitely of the opinion that like build stuff right now because it's never been cheaper to do it and it won't always be this cheap.
Yeah, the tokens themselves, the efficiency of token usage is coming down, but what you find is that is coming down, but you end up using the most powerful model, so your usage goes up, so it levels out. But yeah, you're right. I think it feels like a bit of an arms race at the moment. It's like build, ship, because you don't know how long this window is.
For sure.
Until government regulation, until stuff gets pulled, cost. Yeah. So it's never been the best time to be a founder, but it feels in a day-to-day like you're in an arms race. It's just the pace is just frantic.
Intense, yeah. And then super interestingly, I read this piece of research or like a published article from Claude and Brain Labs, which was talking about how Brain Labs had implemented Claude inside their organization.
Yes, that's right.
And what was really interesting about it is they'd given everyone access to Claude, which I've heard has been done in lots of other organizations as well, right? And they said to people, go build the things that you need to build for your job. So like make scheduled tasks, create artifacts, like build skills that help you to do your job more efficiently. And what's beautiful about that is giving everyone the chance to build something that makes their day job work a little bit better. The challenge, of course, if you do that in a large organization is everyone basically builds a different version of the same thing and you burn an absolute shit ton of tokens and the costs are just going to spiral. And what was super clever about how they approached it at Brain Labs is they had almost like this self-learning mechanism, which I can't remember whether it was every week or every month. It would scan all of the skills, all of the artifacts, all of the tools that have been built by the team, looked for where there was overlap and crossover, and basically created made them redundant, the ones they didn't need, and then published the one that worked best and then pushed it out to everybody.
Yeah, nice.
And it's kind of running it in the background. I thought that was super smart because it's kind of a combination of like the bottom-up approach of letting everything be quite entrepreneurial, but at the same time having like this oversight from the top, which in theory would lead to, I think, a really efficient way of using 100%. Claude.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about these closed-loop systems. And it's very difficult to do, right? A big agency, I think Brain Labs is 1,000+ people. But it's amazing to see their approach at a large media agency, marketing agency, to be able to do that, because it's a big task. Like you say, everyone's doing different things. You've obviously got a very different hierarchy, typically a pyramid, which doesn't really work with a closed loop system. So yeah, I applaud what they're doing. We're going to see more agencies do that because ultimately it comes down to margins. Agencies have very tight margins, typically working to 20% or often lower. So this structure, this closed loop system is just going to make their organization much more profitable, much more efficient. So we do the same at Blackbird, but it's a much easier process because we're small, we're lean. But yeah, it makes the business better every day because it's all feeding back into that system.
Yeah, what I did actually when I read that article is I took it to Claude and I said, hey, tell me how I can implement this.
Do this now.
In the small organization that I've got. Yeah. And now I have this, like, again, sort of recursive loop that goes and checks all the different skills that have been built and make sure there's not any overlap in them, or if there is, flag it, and then I can solve it, which is, I think, helpful in terms of like the way that you've got everything set up. And then I think kind of connected to that, and then another really interesting thing that we're going to see happen is you and I have both been in the ad space previously. We know that, generally agencies will charge a fee for running performance ads for brands, and those fees have been getting compressed over time, compressed by competition because more agencies coming in with the ability and capability to run those ads and doing it on leaner headcount or like on lower budgets. And I think AI is just basically going to make that become even more intense.
Oh, for
right?
sure.
And you think about the planning, the keyword planning, the building of adverts, the management of adverts, the whole thing. It was already quite automated, but with AI, it just really kind of collapses the workload that's required for
100%. Yeah, you're going to start to see clients querying like, what are we paying for here, especially if you're on like an FTE model or time. So it's definitely shifting to more of an output focused. And we're seeing agencies now, and we're seeing it across a lot of the big holdcos, trying to adapt to be more platform based, see themselves more of a tech company, and then it becomes the efficiency flywheel just kicks in. So we do this at Blackbird. Again, the tech background has helped me, but we're an agency plus technology, and I think that's just the way to scale and keep those margins really solid. So it's fascinating to see how people are going to adapt. Much more difficult for like the large holdcos, but independents like Brain Labs, it's going to be an easier process. Not easy, like it's not you kind of flip a switch and overnight it's done, but I think it's going to be easier for those independents to kind of move and continue eating away at the larger holdcos.
I think so, yeah. And then, we talked then a bunch about agencies, but the same is going to be true, I think, for a lot of the organizations that we're working for or doing work for, the brands, especially the large ones, trying to figure out if there's a way to reconfigure the way that they organize themselves, specifically in the marketing function, like we just talked about, but it cuts across all parts of the business. And it's interesting because I think quite often when we're having a conversation with a brand, the entry point in is, we're talking to them about visibility and AI search, but the conversation sometimes goes off in tangents about like, how can, you're using AI to improve your workflows. Can you come and show us how to do that with our workflows? I'm like, that's like, I can give you some advice. That's my
other business.
Exactly. Yeah. But that's going to be a huge industry, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. We've seen it a lot actually, because we've shown our closed loop system at Blackbird, how we're using fleets and multi-agent approaches, and like brands are like, holy crap, this is what we need. How do I get my hands on this? So that's going to be a whole nother beast where you have consultancies, and I know a few already that are doing it, really moving legacy businesses to be AI native. That's a bigger beast, but huge opportunity.
For sure. And I think Anthropic actually have roles out at the moment that relate to that, right?
Deployed engineers.
Yeah, exactly. So, and they're going after like industry segments, because I think I saw they had a role that had roles that were CPG focused, healthcare focused, travel focused, etc. So looking for people in those verticals, and I guess like super interesting role and job to have in the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, for sure. And there's going to be a lot of demand, especially these legacy chunky businesses, in particular kind of PE backed, VC backed firms, where they're looking at, okay, how do we make this as efficient as possible? How do we make the margins really healthy? Forward deployed engineer into the organization and just basically cut costs across the board, whether that's humans, whether that's just tooling, whatever it may be. There's going to be a massive demand for it. So exciting.
I do know a couple of people who are kind of in that space, looking at helping businesses out with workflows. And what's really interesting is, they said basically AI is started the conversation about looking for efficiencies, finding ways to do things more quickly. And a lot of the time they go in, they do the audit, and they're like, this is just vanilla automation, stuff that should have been plugged in, or connected like 10 years ago, but hasn't yet been done because no one did the work.
Not been used in decades.
And so I think it's funny that everyone, maybe like the shiny object of AI is drawing people towards the idea of just getting basics done on automation. And I think that also relates back to the work we do on AI search, which is quite often we uncover some like really basic work that isn't done on a catalog of products, things like all the data and attribute accuracy that's been left and not looked at, and now AI means that you need to go and do that stuff. But then the great news is actually AI can actually do a fantastic job of helping you out solve all of that as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's been a lot that's been kind of left behind. And things in like the SEO space that maybe weren't as relevant for Google, but now extremely relevant. So you can now pick that up through AI, identify the gaps, leverage AI to create the fixes and ship them. And then, it just becomes a flywheel.
And the cost of doing that obviously come down, because I think before you had like reasonably high, not super high, but like a cost of doing SEO work.
Yeah.
And then, the benefit of it not always being, super easy to prove out.
Yeah.
Especially when you had the opportunity just to pay for the visibility, right? So, you could pay and you could see the ROI from your Google ads, or maybe on Amazon through, the sponsored product ads. And so then you maybe didn't spend so much time on optimizing the PDP or on optimizing your website for Google, but now you can do those. You can see the gaps more easily and more quickly, and you can get them fixed leveraging AI as well. So just I think means that more people are doing those things. And then what's really interesting about that is actually that then is creating more work, right? Because that's actually work that wasn't being done before.
Yeah, for sure. It's been interesting, and obviously there's a lot of doom and gloom in the industry around job loss and AI's taking your job. We can automate this. This function isn't going to exist going forward. It's actually been the reverse from what we've seen, and we're talking here over the last 2 months. Like, it's been that fast that actually it's creating more demand. It's creating new functions. Agentic workflows are obviously 2026, the big thing in AI. That's creating new workloads and new processes, so there needs to be humans in the loop to manage it. So that's been fascinating to see, kind of the doom and gloom job cuts, but actually then it's steadied a little bit and it's come back and we're starting to see more. So again, we don't know what that looks like 2-3 years out, but at least for now, it's an amazing time to be in the AI space.
For sure.
And building and shipping and really going to market. So if you are in like a large organization, you're feeling pretty stagnant, I'd recommend Founder Life is incredible. It's challenging, but right now is the best time to be launching and building.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more on that. And then a few people have asked me and come to me saying, I want to get started in this space. What should I do? Where should I go read? What should I look at? And I had this email that I'd sent to a whole bunch of people, which was links out to a bunch of different articles that I thought were interesting and a good place to start. But actually now just send people directly to the Anthropic Learning website, because on there there's like really basic 101 about Claude Code, just about LLMs in general. It's really kind of easy to use platform, and I think it covers all the bases, and you can go super deep on certain topics. You can also get accreditations that you can then put on your LinkedIn profile as well. So if someone's like thinking about, I quite like the idea of doing it, but I don't feel like I have any or limited knowledge in the space right now, go get yourself a few accreditations done on Anthropic, slam them onto your LinkedIn as a good place to start. Yeah, you'll level up pretty quickly. And then, I mean, when we launched, I was thinking, okay, who do we need to bring into the organization to kind of level up and make sure we've got that kind of baseline? But then within Claude itself and other LLMs, you have access to skills, projects, and different processes and tooling that you can use, that you can have your own CFO, your CMO, your marketing lead. So you can build functions and people around those capabilities in Claude, and you can kind of automate a lot of it. So whereas before you would have needed to hire quite aggressively at the start, but now it's not really the case. You can build your own teams. You can. And then it reminded me that with a few of the founders that I know, we've been trading MD files, like basically instructions. So like, hey, that's a cool thing. How do you build that? Like, well, I'll give you the file, and then you can go, deploy it in your version of Claude as well. And then what I quite often do is I'll say to Claude, I'm like, hey, I want to share this file, but like, I don't need them to see all of the LMO 7 specific stuff, or just make it a more generic version that I can share outwardly, and then I'll pass that on to them. And then someone showed me that actually on Etsy you can go and buy a load of skills, for like £5 a shot. And I was like, I don't think anyone should go do that, because like,
make me a millionaire in 1 week.
MD. And then probably there's loads of what is it called when you put like the
prompt injection?
Prompt injection stuff in there as well. So like, don't do that. don't go and spend £5 on prompts on Etsy. But like, definitely do speak to other people who are doing stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
And if they've got cool prompts, or they've got cool markdown files which give instructions to Claude for skills and various things, like I think like great to ask if people can share those with you.
Yeah, for sure.
And then really easy to adapt those to how you want to use them as well, because you drop them in and then you can just ask Claude, okay, well, can you have a look at this, and you can recommend how I implement this in my own version, and it'll explain it to you and tell you how to do it.
Yeah, for sure. And there's obviously that is fantastic, and you can plug it into your own workflows. And then there's just so many networks out there as well that you can kind of plug into and just ask advice. I'm thinking about this. What does this look like? Has anyone got any feedback on what we're building here? So there's things like AI search leaders, founder on, really good networks to kind of tap into. Because at times as a founder, it can seem quite isolating. You're on your own, you're kind of making decisions, thinking...
Spending too much time with Claude.
Correct, yeah. Far too much. You're sometimes thinking, actually, is this the right path? Is this the right direction I need to be taking? So it's always good to have those founder communities.
For sure.
And there's lots of stuff. We're obviously based in the UK. Lots of stuff in and around London. You run your own, obviously, AI shed in Bristol, which I haven't come to yet, but I'll come to the next one.
For sure.
But there is a lot of communities around there, kind of just double check, like, am I doing the right thing here?
Yeah, exactly. Go speak to people about it. And I think there's nothing that you can lose from doing that, because it's day one for everybody, especially when the new models come out. So I'd be very surprised if you ask a question and someone gives you like an answer like, hey, come on, man, you should know that already. Like no one's that far ahead. So.
What's the hardest thing you found about launching? Because obviously you're 4 or 5 months into
4 or 5 months of doing it full time. I think maybe the hardest thing is trying to find some balance. And what I mean by that is just like, I think if you're commuting into an office and then you're in an office for a certain amount of time, and and then coming back from the office, it's quite easy to box that time as the work time. Working on your own business, I mean, I'm thinking about it all the time. I'm working on it all the time, and like creating the right boundaries is the bit that I find the hardest thing to do. And one thing I say to people is like, it's like every day is a holiday, but also every day is a working day. Like I can choose how I spend my time, but obviously I'm always thinking about the work that I'm doing. So I think it's like a two-sided, double-edged sword.
Yeah, for sure. You have as much flexibility as you want, but realistically you end up working 7 days a week because you're thinking about the business all day. And actually the bit that gets me is I'm like, I just quickly Claude that thing, because I'm like, because you can build something so quick. In the past I would have been like, oh hey, I've got an idea, I'm going to write it down, I'm going to put it on the list, and like at some point I may or may not come to it. And now I'm like, I've got an idea, I'm gonna build it in about 20 minutes, and then it takes 2 hours, and then like what was supposed to be a short break from doing something with the kids is like a whole bunch of time that I've taken out. My wife thought I was cheating on her with someone called Claude for a while. So I was constantly talking about Claude this, Claude that. But I think similar to you, that's the hardest bit, is like switching off, because there is so much you can do. And whereas before, pre-AI, it had been somewhat clearer on like what I should be working on. There was more structure to like how to make money, how to win leads, how to retain clients, keep them happy. But now you've got the opportunity to build, you've got the opportunity to go in so many different directions. No market is untapped, right? So you can just literally go after stuff that you think is relevant for your business. So I think focus is one key thing which founders need right now, because you can spread so thin
easily. So
I think that's one of the key things I'm challenged with. Bit of a magpie, I go after kind of the next.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's difficult because a good idea might come along, and I'm like, oh, it's kind of adjacent. I'm kind of like, I rationalize to myself that I should do it because it's like close to what I'm doing. But I have a couple of times had to be like, no, like stop spending time doing that thing, because it's really like so disconnected from where you should be putting your energy right now. So that, I think that's really hard. And then it's funny, when I was getting the train into London this morning, like I was like, there's like a couple of things that I'll just get done on the way and bits of admin. And like, I think with like 10 minutes to go, I was like, oh shit, I need to go and do those bits of admin, because I got sucked into some kind of like Claude like wormhole, because I was trying to figure something out that I hadn't even thought that I was going to do today. So like that bit I think is something to try and figure out, like just managing your time and doing the tasks that you need to do without getting massively distracted by what's possible with AI. Yeah,
for sure. You go down rabbit warrens constantly, and then especially the opportunities in different spaces. You end up then building, and you end up doing stuff, and you're like, okay, I need focus here. So that's one of the biggest challenges, I think, is just...
For sure. And there's a data point on that as well, which is, I think, like apps on the app stores. Like there've never been as many apps deployed, because so many people are building stuff and deploying it. But I think it's like downloads, usages, or spend. I can't remember which one the number is actually flat or declining. So like loads more stuff's getting published because people can now build whatever they want, but actually no one's using any of that stuff. So I guess there's some people who are happy about that setup and where that money's going, but it's not working for everyone.
So many people building, but I mean, time's money. There's so many people that are just in Claude or ChatGPT and building stuff. But it is wild. But I've obviously said it already. But it's definitely, if you're stuck in that role and have been for some time, you're thinking about being an entrepreneur or a founder, like now is a great time to do it, because there's just ample opportunities. And look for those kind of rising tide markets. AI search being one of them. It's just a huge area. Which has other areas like LLM advertising, agentic commerce. It's just so much opportunity, and a lot of brands are really struggling like navigating this. But I mean, we've done the agent economy. I think we've probably come up with 25 new businesses in the episodes we've done. So there's a lot of opportunity out there to kind of build.
Are you going to get Claude to go back over the transcripts and give you a list?
I'm going to take this, take all our previous recordings, and then just say, right, 4 or 5 new businesses, build
Let's
them.
go. And then
Submit.
maybe a good way to wrap up the show today. I mean, we talked a lot about connecting with people. We've come here today to do our first face-to-face. I guess if people who are listening or watching are interested in knowing more about AI search or about AI applications in general, or about building a business around AI, then both of us are wide open to being connected on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
and then
for sure.
I'm really into meeting up with people as well and finding out what's going on. So, if you're in London or where I live in Bristol, please do give me a shout, and I can meet up with people for a coffee and to chat all things AI.
Sounds good. Yeah, that's always open to meeting in person. I think it's important. So, London, Bristol, wherever anyone is, I think it's a good thing.
Cool.
Awesome.
Should we wrap it there?
Let's wrap it there. Yeah. Thanks for joining. Episode 9 of the Agent Economy, first one face to face. I'd actually never met Stephen before in person, so here we are today. You're much taller in real life, actually. So,
so are you.
Cheers. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you at the next one, episode 10, coming to you next week. Cheers.